Conservation Mismatch by Jenna Scull. This research project has a few main goals. To assess the locations of biodiversity hotspots by overlapping rasters of amphibians, birds, mammals, and trees to get a hotspot map. To assess the locations of public protected lands and turn them into hotspots. And to visually analyze the relationship between the two. The first article we will be looking at is Conservation Mismatch by Jesse Greenspan. While protecting areas in nature, such as landscapes, national reserves, and parks, are very important, these areas are unfortunately not home to many vulnerable species. Greenspan brings up the point that we need to begin protecting areas that hold rich biodiversity in order to prevent extinction of these species. These maps show the small range and threatened mammals, birds, and amphibians in the United States. It emphasizes the fact that endemic species are all over, and it should be a priority that they are protected. The next article we'll be looking at is U.S. Protected Lands Mismatch Biodiversity Priorities by Clinton Jenkins. Although there is a lot of land that is protected in the United States, this land does not cover many areas that are high priority in terms of biodiversity. Much of the land that is protected is in the west, whereas many endemic species lie in the southeast. The map on the left shows the areas of protected land, whereas the map on the right shows the areas of high biodiversity. Jenkins adds that protection of endemic species should be a high priority for society. In order to assess the locations of biodiversity hotspots using the Jenkins layers, we must take into account a variety of the species mentioned. By overlapping rasters of amphibians, birds, mammals, and trees, and using a raster calculator tool, we are able to get a hotspot map of all biodiversity. As told by Jenkins, all of the high priority areas for biodiversity lie in the southeast. The red depicts areas of high species density, while the yellow and gray depict less. The next article we're looking at is Effective Conservation Requires Clear Objectives and Prioritizing Actions, Not Places or Species by Christopher Brown. Brown's idea is that the conservation of land should be based on economic efficiency, minimizing costs, and should prioritize actions rather than biodiversity. He expresses that many protected areas were protected in the first place because of their low cost, ease of access, and stunning scenery. It is also unclear about whether or not protecting these areas of high species diversity would actually achieve any particular objective. The maps show protection status and ownership of lands in the United States. This next article is once again by Clinton Jenkins and is in response to Brown's article. Jenkins argues that the process for prioritization should be based on species density and biodiversity for animals who are being threatened with extinction. He agrees with the fact that cost minimization is important, but expresses that it should ultimately not be the driving factor in where and how to protect. The map once again shows how much species richness is held in the lower 48 of the United States and how important it is that these priority areas are upheld. In order to assess the areas in the United States that are already protected, we took a map of the protected public lands, used a feature-to-point tool to turn that data into points, and then used a point-to-density tool to find a map of what is and isn't protected. This map shows the hotspots of public land in the United States with high areas of protection. The darker green circles depict higher areas of protection and the lighter areas depict less. The last article we'll be looking at is 6 Common Mistakes in Conservation Priority Setting by Edward Game. Game explains how conservation has too few resources for its challenges to be misapplying or not taking advantage of certain ways of protection. He outlines 6 common mistakes made when prioritizing conservation and offers up solutions to avoid making these mistakes in the future. This final map is a combination of the previous 2 maps shown, neighborhood protection versus biodiversity hotspots in the United States. The dark green areas show land in the US that are protected, and the red-orange areas show land that contains high species diversity. The mismatch between these 2 areas is extremely significant. Further action should be taken to protect species in these high biodiverse areas to prevent them from going extinct. Although low cost is an important factor in land protection and should be taken into consideration, it should not be the driving factor in deciding where to protect and where to leave exposed. It should truly be a societal goal to ensure preservation of endemic species.